All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're unpacking this absolutely incredible Total Life Cycle or TLC analytics report that completely shatters pretty much every assumption we have about what really drives a luxury resort's environmental footprint. We're going through a real-world explainer based on hard data, and trust me, it's going to totally change the way we think about sustainability and hospitality. So, picture this. You and I are playing environmental detectives at a 5-star, 400-plus room luxury spa resort, right? We have to ask ourselves, what are the true culprits of greenhouse gas emissions here? Usually, when you walk into a sprawling, gorgeous property like that, your eyes immediately go to the obvious things. You see the massive heated pools, you feel the constant blast of air conditioning, or you notice the hundreds of lights blazing in the lobby. Because of that visual impact, we naturally assume the biggest environmental hit comes from direct operations, like electricity and heating. I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it? But reality? Reality points us towards something much more complex and vastly larger. We're talking about the hidden value chain, which brings us to our first major concept, the hidden majority, otherwise known as Scope 3. Before we start throwing actual numbers around, let's just quickly define what this term means. Scope 3 basically encompasses all the indirect greenhouse gas emissions that occur in a company's entire value chain. So we're talking about everything from purchased goods and services, the upstream transportation, the waste disposal, and yes, even guest travel. It's the entire vast network of background activity required to actually make the resort function day to day. And here is our first massive jaw dropper. Look at that huge chunk right there. A staggering 78.35% of the resort's total climate impact comes from these indirect Scope 3 sources. By comparison, Scope 1, which is the direct stuff like on-site fuel combustion, is just 13.38%. And Scope 2, the purchased electricity and heat, makes up a measly 8.27%. Looking at this granular, activity-based breakdown really drives a crucial point home. Think about it. If a hotel only focuses on, say, swapping out its light bulbs or turning down the thermostat a couple of degrees, they are completely ignoring nearly 4/5 of their total climate impact. Without addressing this massive green slice you see here, any sustainability effort is just kind of scratching the surface. So how do they even catch all these hidden emissions? Well, TLC Analytics uses a really meticulous activity-based methodology. They aren't just taking the resort's financial spreadsheet and making vague guesses based on how much money was spent. No, they're doing a granular, row-by-row analysis of the actual physical products and services utilized, mapping the entire life cycle literally from manufacturing all the way to disposal. And that intense level of detail is exactly how we uncovered our next unbelievable finding. All right, let's head to the dining room for the menu's massive impact. So, we step into the restaurant and we immediately hit this massive number, 51.28%. Take a second and just try to guess what could possibly make up over half of that gigantic Scope 3 footprint we were just talking about. Yeah, it's the food. It turns out that food and beverage operations account for an absolutely overwhelming 51.28% of the entire resort's greenhouse gas emissions. More than half of the property's total climate impact is embedded directly in the meals being served to the guests. Let's drill down even further. Deconstructing the beef footprint. Seriously, brace yourselves for this next data point. 34.71%. No joke, over 1/3 of the resort's entire carbon footprint across absolutely all of its operations is tied to just one single item: beef. That's right, the cows are literally out-emitting the air conditioners and the heated swimming pools combined. It's wild to think about. And looking at this breakdown, you can see how beef absolutely dwarfs every other food category. It makes up 68% of the food emissions alone, generating almost 2.5 million kilograms of CO2 equivalent. Contrast that to pork at 8%, cheese at 7.5%, or chicken at 7%. It's just a completely, entirely disproportionate impact. Now, when we put our data detective hats back on and slice up that beef footprint even further, we see it's the high-volume favorites that are really driving the bus here. Beef burgers alone account for 18.34% of the total beef-related emissions. Prime cuts like strip loin and sirloin follow closely at 16.04%, with brisket sitting at 15.18%. So it's these high-volume, highly popular menu offerings moving the needle in a massive, massive way. Now, you might be thinking, oh, it must be because they're flying the meat halfway across the globe, right? Actually, scratch that. Travel miles only account for about 6 to 10% of overall food emissions. The real culprits happen way earlier in the production phase. We're talking about land use change, like deforestation to make room for pastures, methane emissions, which, yes, means cow burps, and the incredibly heavy resources needed for feed production and manure management. This benchmark chart really perfectly illustrates the science. See beef from a beef herd just sitting way, way up there at the very top of the emissions ladder? It produces an astonishing 99.48 kilograms of greenhouse gas emissions per kilogram of product. It just wildly outpaces poultry, fish, and pretty much any plant-based foods you could possibly put on a plate. Okay, let's shift gears completely. The surprising cost of comfort. Let's step out of the dining room and head upstairs to the guest bedroom. If beef is the absolute heavyweight on the menu, what do you think is driving the highest emissions among your room's everyday consumables? Is it those little tiny shampoo bottles? Maybe the coffee pods? Well, take a look at this number, 47%. That percentage represents just one single, highly unexpected little amenity in your room. Believe it or not, it's the slippers. Those innocent-looking, fluffy, single-use room slippers account for nearly half of the emissions in the entire guest consumables category. Together, they create over 133,000 kilograms of CO2 equivalent. It's pretty mind-blowing. So why do these slippers cost the Earth so much? It really boils down to sheer volume and nasty materials. Because they're basically single-use for every new guest, the cotton uppers and those incredibly carbon-intensive EVA foam soles pile up extremely fast, usually heading straight to a landfill. Add in the heavy, complex bedroom furniture, like the mattresses, which account for another 17% of this category's emissions, and you quickly realize that standard, everyday room comfort is actually a major carbon driver. So how do we fix this? Let's look at pathways to real sustainability. The good news here is that finding these hidden emissions empowers operators to finally take the right actions. It starts with clever menu engineering, really rethinking how those high-impact beef burgers are presented. Then, protein diversification, making lower-impact options like chicken, sustainable seafood, or plant-based dishes way more appealing. And finally, active portion control, offering a less but better philosophy with high-quality cuts. By pulling these levers, resorts can massively cut their footprint without ever sacrificing that luxurious 5-star guest experience. So our little data investigation through this TLC analytics report is a wrap, but it definitely leaves us with a pretty provocative thought. Now that you actually know the massive hidden environmental cost embedded in that room service burger and those little single-use slippers waiting right by your bed, how will this evidence change your choices the next time you check in?